There's a big difference between how you learn European history in school with names and places and people and events and the vague archaeological record of North America. This begins to change it. Now we have names, we have nations, we have events, we have heroes. This is the beginning of this. This is the lost history of North America.
North America, North America.
Perfect.
I've got some spectacular new insights into the pre-Columbian world. If you've followed the research that I've been doing, what I'm about to show you has not been presented in public before, and I think it will blow you away. I want to make a special invitation to any Native Americans who are watching, or First Nations in Canada, or Indigenous peoples, if you're even watching with subtitles in Latin America. What you're about to see, I think, will be an extremely valuable contribution to understanding the history of the world before the Americas. So without further ado, let's launch into the lost history of North America. If you grew up like I did, you learn next to nothing about the pre-Columbian history of North America. What happened? Who was here? What were they doing? Where did they go? All these sorts of questions, basic questions that typical history classes answer for other regions of the globe, have been left blank. I grew up knowing nothing about it. I knew who was here when Europeans arrived, but that was it. If you've spent any time trying to study the answers that have been offered to these questions, you've probably discovered that there's a major gap in our knowledge. And this gap is what prohibits us from being able to say more. You might say, what gap? I'm going to show you the gap. Once I show you the gap, I think you'll say, aha, now I know what you're talking about. I see. This is the major hurdle we have to overcome if we want to solve this mystery. And to show you this gap, I want to start with something familiar. We're going to walk through the history of America, beginning with European arrival, as so many of us have been taught. We'll walk forward in time to get our bearings, and then walk backwards in time. And as we try to walk backwards, then the gap will appear. For many of us, myself included, the history of North America begins with Columbus's arrival in what's now the Caribbean in 1492, his many voyages. Typically, my history classes, my own, would then jump forward to, if we're talking about the history of the United States, the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims, fast forward even more to 1776, the War for Independence of the 13 colonies. And at this point is typically when history books will cover who was here, beginning with tribes on the East Coast, because these were the peoples that the Europeans encountered as the colonies gained their independence. So you talk about the Massachusetts and the Narragansett and the Iroquois, the Alliance of the Confederacy, the Mohawk and the Seneca, the Powhatan, and so on. And what's, I think, I can retrospectively now look back and say, aha, this is what was so valuable, is we could put not only nation names down on paper, but we could put their locations on a map. And this begins to give us history. We could also put names to faces. If you go further south, this is sort of the northeast, if you go to the southeast section of what's now the United States, you can talk about the Chickasaw and the Choctaw and the Cherokee and the Creek and the Seminole and the
Trail of Tears.
To get to that point, you need to step back a point. The hardest part I've seen in my fight, and I'm the chief of the tribe, is when you come up against people of color as well as European descent, and you say Indians, they're looking for the Bill Cody, Long Ranger Tonto style thing. And when you actually show them that the indigenous people were actually my color, as I have a habit telling people, are cocoa brown, or a brown piece of leather well put together. I have a lot of ways of using slangs to tell people that we are still here because we were not weak. We were here before DeSoto and Christopher Columbus. You have to be strong to make it through those disasters. During Katrina, I told them Katrina was not a Category 5. My people had came through some Category 5s, and we survived them. So Katrina, to me, was going to be an easy thing to survive. Because when you're hit by a category named DeSoto, Category 5, and it lingers around for 400 to 500 years, steady beating on the shore, and it just won't move, that's a disaster. Not a disaster that just come and go, but a disaster that's still lingering. Then when you have a person like George Washington, that was a Category 5. He hit, and you're still lingering because he's still on shore, okay? So that's two categories sitting on shore at the same time. It's a God-given right, okay? A God-given right. Because even the people that's in churches of whatever race, they keep singing about the 12 tribes of Israel, or they keep singing about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, everybody didn't come from Jacob. That's right. And if they did, that means everybody ought to be black. Because Jacob was marrying within his tribe people that looked like him. He married his uncle's children, okay? So when we sit here, we won't even tell the truth about what Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob looked like. So then I have to go to mine, like I told this caller that come from you. How far back you think they've been stealing our color and race? And do you think they're going to give the real people back their race? No.
So there absolutely is proof of the black Seminole importance to the tribe.
Absolutely. There's a lot of intelligence information that passes back to Washington. For instance, General Jessup, the commanding general, writes back at one point to the War Department and says, the Negroes rule the Indians.
Of course, the Nagas rule in the stronghold of the Nagas. The Naga is the Indian. Y'all thought we would sleep forever. It's a rude awakening going on right now. Peace, brother. Peace, sister. Tribe up. They thought we would sleep forever. Rise and shine, my Naga, rise and shine. They never thought you would figure it out. They said the Indians died off. And then they turned right around in the same breath and claimed to be you. Big dummy. Rise and shine, my Naga. It's a rude awakening for some. But it's a grand rising for others. America, stronghold of the Naga. Stronghold of the Commons, tribe up. Do you know who you are, my Naga? Are you asleep, my Naga? How long you gonna walk around indoctrinated, subjected, and subdued? Rise and shine, my Naga. Tribe up.
this journey of who we are. Why are we second-class citizens? Why do we take less? Why are and I'm gonna say it because I'm not afraid of free. Because you can believe in what you want to believe in, but the truth, when you look at the facts, the truth speak for themselves.
30 years. And he comes home and he says, what happened to all the people? What happened to all the black folks? They're dead. Dead? What you mean? Well, you wanted to sell crack to each other. You wanted to turn each other into zombies. You wanted to shoot each other so you can buy some Nikes. You want to abort every time you create a baby, you want to abort it. It's called genocide. We don't think. We're told certain things without an explanation, but the mental capacity that we're in will do anything to keep the charade going.
If someone looked at you right now, they would say that you were African American, would they not? Now, your grandfather, though, was supposed to have been, according to records.
Well, he was.
Or he was the last. Well, no, but according to, he wasn't the last
Right,
of
exactly,
the Nottoway,
exactly.
of the Cherahaka Nottoway tribe, though. Tell us about him.
Well, my grandfather, he passed away in 1960.
When Europeans arrived in America, they documented the Indians not only in writing, but in artwork, on maps, and in continental allegories. But arguably the most revealing, the most eye-opening, the most authentic depictions of the American Indians documented by European colonizers were the original cigar store Blackamoor Indians. American Indians and tobacco have always been associated because the American Indians introduced tobacco to Europeans. As early as the 1600s, European tobacconists used figures of American Indians to advertise their shops. Without batting an eye, modern-day historians will make the ridiculously bogus claim that, quote-unquote, because European carvers had never seen a Native American, these first cigar store Indians looked like Negroes with feathered headdresses and other fanciful exotic features. To make the claim that European carvers had never seen Native Americans is not only dumb, but an intentional effort to uphold a false historical narrative. How are they colonizing America? Blindfolded? The first cigar store Indians were called Black Boys, or quote-unquote Virginians. Eventually, in an effort to indoctrinate America's true indigenous people, the so-called American Negro, and the entire general public at large, eventually, the European cigar store figure began to take on a more quote-unquote authentic yet highly stylized native visage. And by the time smoke shop figures arrived in the Americas in the late 1900s, over 300 years after the original ones, they had become quote-unquote thoroughly Indian, or thoroughly whitewashed. Tribe up. All European nations participated in the invasion of the Americas. France was a key player in the exploitation of the so-called New World and the enslavement of the American Indians. The French staked their claim upon vast portions of North America, referred to as the Louisiana Territory. The French colonial empire would eventually stretch from Canada all the way south to Haiti and many other Caribbean islands, and also in South America, particularly in Brazil. France waged war against the American Indians and also against other colonial competition. In these wars, such as the Natchez War of 1729 and the French and Indian War of 1754, many Indians were killed and enslaved. Slavery of First Nations in the colony of New France was formalized through colonial law in 1709 with the passage of the ordinance rendered on the subject of the Negro Indians called Pawnees. Pawnees was a term used for American Indians in Canada, a region of New France. Indigenous black slaves were generally called Pawnees, anglicized to Pawnee. Most slaves of First Nations descent having originated from Pawnee tribes. The term is synonymous with Negro Indian slave in French colonies, with a slave from any tribe being called Pawnee. So the term Pawnee was more commonly used to designate native black slaves. Amongst those is young Paul, slave of Paul LeCoyer, who resides in Montreal. His baptismal records reads as follows. Today, the 17th of August, 1704, has been baptized Paul Savage, aged around 10 years old, staying in the house of Paul LeCoyer, living in this parish, who claims having purchased said Savage from the Pawnee savages, which had been enslaved by other savages named Les Renards. He was bought from them and said Paul LeCoyer is the godfather of the baptized child, and his wife named Frances LeConte is the godmother, who have promised to raise him and instruct him in the faith of the Apostolic and Roman Catholic Church, and to keep him under their service for as long as God wills. The godmother signed, and the godfather has declared not knowing how to write or sign as is inquired. We should stop and take note that the young boy Paul was not given his quote-unquote master's last name. He was given the surname Savage, which is a trope placed upon the indigenous peoples of America by Europeans. The noble savage. In Western anthropology, philosophy, and literature, the noble savage is a stock character who is unconquered by civilization. As such, the noble savage symbolizes the innate goodness and moral superiority of a primitive people living in harmony with nature. The stock character of the noble savage originated from the Essay of Cannibals, 1580, about the Tupinamba people of Brazil, wherein the philosopher Michael de Montaigne presents nature's gentleman, the bone savage, counterpart to civilized Europeans in the 16th century. So Frenchman Michael de Montaigne is the originator of the bone savage character, noble savage, referring to the American Indians he encountered in Brazil in 1580. And from the late 1500s throughout the 1800s, the French would encounter, conquer, kill, and enslave American Indians from North to South America. If there's anyone who can accurately depict an American Indian, it would be the French. To the extent that several French clockmakers became famous for making clocks featuring American Indians, called none other than the Bone Savage clocks, or the Noble Savage clocks. Now I know Wikipedia, Google, and every other source on the planet gives us one thing when it comes to an American Indian. It shows us one depiction. But if we rewind about, let's say, 200 or 300 years, let's see how the French depicted the American Indian, or so-called bone savage, on their clocks.
Lost History of North America.